See, you're on the couch again.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna get rid of it.
No, no, it's a good. I think it's a very like kind of casual setup, low key.
That's me. I'm a casual Indo-Europeanist. Uh, like I'm a Chili's Indo-Europeanist, or an Olive Garden Indo-Europeanist. It's not quite like a Ruth's Chris Indo-Europeanist.
Hmm.
Right. And
Wow.
here your family. You get endless Indo-European breadsticks. I don't know. This analogy is gonna break down.
Yep.
Um, I like your office.
You know, it's taken shape. At least I have all my books. They I spent a long time away from these old friends, It's like there's the pandemic and then there was that time that I was in Munich and I didn't it was like I'm not gonna ship the books over.
Sure.
So it's nice to just kind of have them again, I guess.
Where is your office?
I now the Near Eastern languages and cultures is over in a thing that when I was here was called just generically the Humanities Building, and it's kind of kitty corner across the quad from Dodd,
Yeah.
which you're probably um but at some point someone gave a giant pile of money in the meantime, and now it's called Kaplan Hall. So
Okay.
when I motion for it, you can kind of see it goes out like that, and
Oh.
yeah, it's sort of generic Indo-European, general Indo-European on on these shelves right behind me, and then I have my like general linguistics materials in the next shelf. The following shelf is Anatolian and Greek. Someone might be able to see some of those green and yellows over there. And
Uh,
the last shelf, yeah, it looks like kind of more classicsy stuff. It's the furthest away because I don't use it that much. But it's got materials from my previous life as a classicist.
I like your organization actually.
Yeah, still it's not a perfect system, but gets the job done. What I really need here is more like desk space. Like I need more like room to spread out and actually do research.
Yeah.
They didn't actually give me any money or any tables to do. So like I'm basically just waiting for someone to abandon their office and be like, oh no, I don't need this table. I'll be like, I'll take that table.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, what books do you find yourself referring to most often? What do you pull off that shelf the most?
What do I pull off the shelf the most? That's a good question. Weirdly enough, not these Indo-European things, many of which I just often use on PDF. Although this one, I'm not sure if it's visible. Yeah, this one here, I use the Rigvedic word concordance a lot, Blavatsky's thing, just to look up where things are and where they occur all the
Mhm.
time, and because it sucks to use as a PDF. Um, another one that I use all the time that's physical. It's actually I use it so often. I'm teaching Luwian right now, and so I have these big corpus of hieroglyphic Luwian inscriptions.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I've managed to stumble into a copy of one of these. Someone donated a copy when we had an extra one in pies, and
Who who publishes that?
it's from well, what was De Gruyter, I guess, but is now going to be De Brill or whatever,
Oh,
and things will cost even closer to infinity than they already do.
right.
So that's something to look forward to in life. But this thing is great, and there's going to be a new volume of it. So this was published, I think, in like 2001, and at that point, it had all the hieroglyphic Luwian inscriptions up to that date. But now there have been more, and there's going to be a new one coming out very soon, or new volume that has the rest of the inscriptions that have been found since then.
Cool. And if it's coming from DeBrill, I mean, look, how do you trust a title in Indo-European studies that didn't set you back four figures?
That is,
I
sorry,
mean,
was the last thing you said?
how do you trust a title in Indo-European studies that didn't set you back four figures?
Right, exactly. Yeah, agreed. That's the only way to do it. And don't worry, soon we'll be paying four figures even for like, republished dissertations under a Brill cover.
Yeah.
Uh, I,
Oh, if that day is not already here.
Mhm.
Uh, so since I don't think there's actually a ton of news items this month, so I thought we might do some more generic Indo-European talking. Actually, this library subject is kind of interesting. Um, but folks, we're happy to take your Indo-European studies related questions too. Actually, it was Davis who was asking a little bit about your bookshelf.
Mhm.
Um, you know, my organization is a little bit different. I have moved so much that I'm like frantic about cutting down on things, physical things that I have to move because I'm always moving. Um, that started when I was a kid. I moved 19 times before I was 16. Um, like so my grandparents' house was always this really solid anchor that was always the same, but then my parents were just constantly moving, and then I've constantly moved because of you know jobs and studies and life events and whatever. So I don't have actually a huge physical library because what I have has been like purified down to the basics. Um, so I can't really move things around because I've got my laptop wired up to this mic, but I have a uh, mostly studies based bookshelf right here. This is actually sitting on a less often used studies shelf, and then a bedstand focuses as a our functions as a personal reading shelf. So way less stuff. Um, as
That's
for
yeah,
what,
that's impressively minimal. I mean, look, I have a ton of these books that many of them I own physically, but like I also have PDFs and I often just use I often just use them that way. And during the pandemic, that was like the most use. And then I guess while I was in Munich too, it's just like I'm so glad that I worked hard to digitize things because I mean, even though it's less pleasant, it's like who knows when you're going to be cut off with your resources. And so like mostly the things that I use in physical form are like yeah, like things that are just way way more usable in physical form. I have one more that I want. One more good one. This one, which mostly sits by the side of my desk, these Hittite, this is the Hittite sign list. It like tells
oh,
you
cool.
like well, the signs are sort of numbered out and then it tells you like their logographic and syllabic values and stuff. And like this kind of thing is like using it on a PDF, it's just a nightmare. It's just like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know,
yeah.
just want to be able to like open it up, flip through, look for the thing that you're looking for. And I don't know, some books need that. And some books it's more important to just have a control F to be able
Yeah,
to
right. I mean, it depends book to book.
uh,
Um, or for me, if something's out of copyright and I've got a PDF of it, or if something's on Kindle, by now I've moved enough times since I first needed it that that's how I read it. Like, for me, my most used PDFs are Noreen's Old West Norse and Old East Norse grammars.
hmm.
The physical books that I keep closest are Gestaden Olesen and Jonas Christensen's editions of the Eddic poems. Um, Evesham's grammar of Old Norse.
That's what it's supposed to look like for people out there. That's
Um,
well worn, that's a well used grammar, and that means you've been doing your homework.
yeah, all my books are
I
like that
should
basically.
um as my teacher Stephanie Jamison has this just amazing copy of well it's this one right here that I have over my shelf that's kind of mine is much less well used. The Geldner's translation of the Rig Veda.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and you probably used this when you were taking Vedic with Jared, because this was that point was really the only scholarly translation of the Rig Veda available at that point.
I believe
But of
so.
course now she's done her own, which is I mean monumental and kind of amazing. But her copy of Geldner is like it's literally just like pieces, like it's just bits of
Oh,
just too much use.
dude.
Kind of amazing.
Oh, hold on. I mean, I've got a book. I got a book that's very similar. One second.
Vem ska följa dig genom världens hav?
All right, yeah. So my books look about like that. This is DeFree's Etymological Dictionary of Old Norse. I mean, it's in a million pieces. My copy of Gordon's Introduction to Old Norse is like that. Oh, the other book that I keep easy to hand for those who want this sort of information is Wright's Grammar of Gothic.
Got some dents in it. What happened with those? Like some looks like someone hammered it.
All kinds of things happen to books when you move, you know. I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely definitely the truth.
I long to settle down. It's such a mythical notion to me, but you know, it's not happened yet. Uh there's a couple questions that come up over here.
Mm.
Let's see. Davis says, what's the current state of phraseology research in historical Indo-European studies? I'm interested in comparative historical phraseology, if such a thing is possible, but not aware of much outside of Watkins's work.
Yeah, this kind of work continues for sure. I mean, there was a real like explosion of this kind of work in the wake of Cal's book in 1995, right? So everybody was pretty excited about doing this. And I kind of get the sense that it fizzled out mostly in the United States. There were a lot of attempts to kind of make these kinds of phraseological comparisons, and a lot of them would involve like so-called lexical replacement. So they'd be like, okay, well, we have reflexes of the dragon slaying formula in language X that haven't been noticed, and the reason that they wouldn't have been noticed is because we've replaced the root for kill with some other root that means kill in that language, and we've replaced the thing for dragon with something else that's a monster in that language. And it's like,
right.
There was a lot of like, oh, you know, you try to find features that would align it with other more well-established versions or clearer versions of the Indo-European language slaying, dragon slaying myth. And but like it just mostly wasn't very convincing. So that's what this school of phraseology definitely lives on, and there's interesting work. There's a good amount of work being done in this in Europe. So they have these a couple of these students of Jose Luis Garcia Ramon come to mind among the kind of the young generation who are doing this. Laura Massetti and Riccardo Ginevre and Matilda Sarangeli. I can type these names out for people, and you could search for them on academia or something, and you would turn up some interesting work. You might be interested, especially in this guy Ginevre's work, where he does a lot of one reason I think that his work is like a little bit has some sort of novel aspects is he's doing a lot more comparison of Germanic and Vedic and sort of taking those as like the cornerstones of the equation rather than like the more traditional comparisons between Greek and Vedic, which while that really is, there's definitely a lot there. A lot of it is already, a lot of the most attractive comparisons have already been made, and so I think this comparison between Germanic and Vedic can be more fruitful. So anyway, those are some names I'll type, maybe when I get a moment I'll type them in the chat. But yeah, there certainly is a vein of this scholarship ongoing, and but just not so much in the US at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable because I think there's such a thing as sort of core Indo-European from an Indo-European studies viewpoint. Everybody does Sanskrit, Greek, Latin. And so comparisons within Sanskrit, Greek, Latin are sort of done. It's hard for people to notice new things. But if someone commands one of those core languages real well and then commands one of the more peripheral things, Germanic, Celtic, Balto-Slavic, whatever, and can do both of those well, there's fruitful stuff to be done there, especially because like if you're more familiar with one of the sub branches, you also know about some of the deeper cuts that are
I really think that the way to making these comparisons successfully, right, is just as you say, like really having a very, very deep knowledge of one particular branch and really being able to find the things that are kind of I don't know. I mean, there, at this point, the easy comparisons have been found. So it's going to involve like a really being able to extract something from the branch that you really know, and then make a reasonable comparison. That, something that people haven't noticed, and then make a reasonable comparison to other things. But yeah, I guess more than anything, to me, the phraseology thing, Cal kind of got pinned it down, and a lot of it really has to be in the linguistic expression. If you're going to recover something unique about these myths, especially when, I mean, it's possible, right? So like, there's two possibilities, right, for us to do the reconstruction, to plausibly reconstruct a feature of an Indo-European myth, and one is lining up the linguistics, like lining up the these lexical equations, like Gwent, Gwent. I should really want to say no augments in Proto-European, Gwent, Ogwin, or whatever, and lining that up and finding the reflexes of that expression. Or alternatively, really refining details of the stories that are just so weird that how else could they have arisen by anything other than inheritance? And those details are harder to find. But my favorite example is still the one that Stephanie Jamison, again to mention, discussed famously, the comparison between Draupadi on the Draupadi in the Mahabharata, and Helen on the walls, the Teikoskopia, where she like gets up there and it points out all the Greek heroes to Priam, but this scene makes no sense in the context of the Iliad, famously, right? So it makes no sense because here they are in principle in year 10 or something of this war, and of course they know who they're fighting against. It doesn't need to be explained, but like it, but it neatly parallels this sort of this introduction scene, this naming scene that you find in Indic epic. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, there are these kind of, you can do it either of those two ways, but they're both hard in different ways, right? So it's hard to find things that are not just like in doing comparative myth that are just kind of cultural, typologically common, or even cultural universals.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like in linguistic reconstruction, part of what you're looking for are one of the big cues that two languages are related is that there's some shared irregularity. And I think in a similar way with phraseology, you're looking for something that seems odd, in one place or another, and that's a better clue than just oh, here's a story about somebody fighting a dragon, which is pretty universal, fighting a monster of some kind. Another question here. B. Yavorsky asks, have you seen the new paper by David Anthony on Proto-Indo-European dating, 10 constraints that limit the late PIE homeland to the steppes? It raises the issue I asked about during a previous Zoom, that the wheeled vehicles related post-Copper Age vocabulary is not compatible with the hybrid model of PIE origins paper that pushed PIE a few thousand years back. Have you seen this paper?
Well, as one of the editors of that volume, I indeed have seen that paper.
Okay.
But yes, actually, I was hoping that someone would raise this, because right, I don't remember if it was his question. It was his question or not that I sort of flailed at last time. But no, I think this paper has exactly the answer that he's looking for. This thing about the sorry, I just have to. So it's his point 1, and so he has these 10 constraints, right, where he's talking about like how does this interface with the language for technical terminology that we have, and the answer, basically, the short version, I think, is it really doesn't fit. Like, it really doesn't work. Like the new chronology on the Hegarty et al. Paper, like you end up with, I think, a lot of the fact that we get the same roots, especially across the non-Anatolian Indo-European languages, showing up meaning things like wheel, is basically an accident on this analysis. So like, we don't really, you'd have to assume that wheel meant something like round running thing, or round, I don't even know what you would, whatever, you have to assign it some meaning that is not wheel, and assume that it became wheel in a bunch of these non-Anatolian Indo-European languages, and that seems really bad. I mean, I think
especially considering there'd be no contact at this point between
No,
you know,
right.
your
No,
Celtic and your Indo-Iranian or something.
no. This whole model posits, I think, a kind of quite early like a quite early diversification of the non-Anatolian languages from the steppe, and that leaves you with a lot of it results in a lot of problems in explaining share commonalities, the same lexeme for the same item in the nuclear European languages. So that was a really good question, and all I can say is I would totally recommend this paper that David wrote. I'm sure that this is just a piece of what's to come. I mean, you know, we kind of he was generous enough to give us something for the proceedings, but I think that there's which is where this will appear. This is from the soon to appear UCLA Indo-European conference proceedings from last year, and but my understanding is like, you know, we're going to see a much larger, bigger study of how the Hegarty et al. Paper does or does not, perhaps more accurately, fit with the archaeological evidence for the spread of Indo-European. Yeah.
And I'll put that, well, let's see, in Vita Vorsi's question, there's the link to the paper on academia.edu. I'll put that on YouTube too. Let me put this up. Rambag asks, what is between Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Germanic? Because Proto-Germanic isn't until the Iron Age, right? And I thought Indo-European culture kind of came with the Bronze Age already. So what I really want to know is there are some Bronze Age cairns in the very, very dark woods by my cabin. That would be in Norway. And if a ghost shows up, I'd like to know in what language I should address it.
Yeah.
So we typically talk about pre-Germanic as a stage before Proto-Germanic. Exactly how to time it's sort of hard to put, you know, this ends at this date, this starts at this date to these things. The Proto-Germanic that we're typically reconstructing is a late-ish Proto-Germanic.
Yeah. I kind of think that's the correct use of the term proto for any of these. I mean, for Proto-European, but also for the you know, the individual the individual branch ancestors. It should really be the last common stage of unity before the internal diversification of Germanic. So like, yeah, so you'll know better than me, but my understanding is that you know, most people would put Proto-Germanic like around the year 0, basically. The last period of the common Germanic speech community.
I think it's about right, because you've got Gothic in the 300s that still looks a lot like a postulated Proto-Germanic. You can, like, Gothic is not Proto-Germanic, but you can look at it and say, okay, I mean, this is a lot like the common ester of English and Norse and German. Also, there are early Elder Futhark inscriptions where you can't possibly regionalize it. There's nothing to say that this is Proto-English or Proto-German or Proto-Norse. It could hypothetically be ancestral to any of them.
What do people call that? What do people, I forgot what the name for, like, what do people describe those kind of ones that can't really be assigned to any of the, like, the inscriptions or whatever
What I hate is when they call it runic, like as a language, because I mean, it's like saying cuneiformic, you know? It's like,
oh, but God. We also do that because we do it when we're not really sure, and it's kind of sucks also. But like, so like, yeah, so like, you know, I'm teaching Luwian, and people, you know, for a long time people was like, oh, cuneiform Luwian and hieroglyphic Luwian, as though these were languages that were different, and it's just much more complicated than that. Like, some of the cuneiform stuff is in the same dialect as the majority of the the hieroglyphic stuff, but like not always, and it's definitely more complicated than that. It's becoming increasingly clear.
Yeah, and there's enough confusion that people get into with writing forms versus language stages that I just hate using writing forms as names for language. I like something like early Northwest Germanic, and the Northwest is really just there because geographically you can rule out it having anything to do with Gothic and a lot of these inscriptions. But you know, you have some interesting questions there, like the Negau helmet, where, you know, this is a few hundred years BC and looks a lot like, well, what you would call it Proto-Germanic. But you can't think that whatever Germanic name somebody in Slovenia heard in, you know, 200 BC or whatever it is, would be in the same language exactly as, you know, a year zero Proto-Germanic, you know, so this went through stages. One, but what's interesting is, but at that point we can tell Grimm's Law has happened, which is of course the most distinctive thing about Germanic. I suspect that the stages you would be looking at, and it would be super hard to tell what dates they would be, there would be some kind of late, probably not unity, I wouldn't use that word, but a late spectrum stage where Germanic and the ancestor of Baltic are still sort of in contact. Because there's a couple common things that seem to have probably airily moved around, like the date of ending.
Yeah.
And some pretty core vocabulary items. You're going to have a kind of a pre-Germanic where maybe Werner's has happened.
I feel well, right. There's a lot of debate about whether Werner's is also like a kind of was a really a one of the last steps in Proto-Germanic, or last things that happened, or whether,
or is it one of the first? You know, like, so yeah, it's hard to date.
Yeah.
Then like really the two things that super distinguish truly Germanic from late, you know, Northwest Proto-Indo-European would be accent gets fixed on the first syllable of the root syllable. And then Grimm's Law, which has happened by like 300 BC, but hard to say exactly when. So some kind of, I don't know, if you've got Bronze Age stuff in Norway and you need to talk to these ghosts, some kind of pre-Germanic. I mean, what it's hard to imagine exactly when. You just can't sequence a lot of these changes, like Indo-European or like late Proto-Indo-European, short A and short O merging in short A, long A and long O merging as long O. Like, when does that happen relative to Grimm's Law? Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah. You probably want, if you could just use some stuff that like really never changes, then you know, some really stable lexical items to try to talk to your ghost, then maybe you could you know, kind of get away from some of these problems, like, you know, the ancestor of English Greek of words like English whoa, or something like this, whoa, like, you know, like, oh, I'm so sad, like, you know, those don't change, like that goes back, like it's basically the same already in Proto-Indo-European. It's like, you know, right. Why?
Well, and it should have stayed Y like up to pretty late Proto-Germanic, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just say Y and you'll definitely be understood.
Please, I'm sad. Don't hurt me. Kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, you can bet on I being something like Eka, right? You
know. Yeah, or just right, some kind of an M form for me, and probably the negator would be something with an, you know, like with an M, like ne or something.
Yeah, definitely in that early stage.
You could, yeah, and then so we're kind of piecing this together.
Oh, actually, speaking of which, another source of real early Germanic is Finnish, because there's so many really early Finnish loans in Germanic, or Germanic loans in Finnish. But even those look basically like what you reconstruct as a late Proto-Germanic.
There's a lot more work now on that being done, on these, yeah, sort of early loanword transmission in the early Indo-European languages. I'm trying to remember the name. I mean, Hus Kronen had that big project on it, and on this sort of stuff, and a bunch of publications came out of that. Yeah, I mean, that would be the big one that comes to mind. But so there's definitely people who are working through those things, and I don't know, trying to combine these with archaeological evidence and stuff. And it's not, I don't know a ton about it, but you know.
No, I don't either. But there's some fascinating stuff in there, especially with Uralic context. Heck, horse could be a van der Voort, right? I mean, there's been some work suggesting that horse, you know, is borrowed to not our word horse, but the Equus word is borrowed to or from some Caucasian language, or Yeniseian, right? Because it kind of looks similar in all those, which is interesting. Like, where is that starting? Yeah, or like you know, there's the fascinating fact that in Uralic languages, Finnish anyway, The word for slave is the same word as Indo-Aryan Arya, right? Like, so
Yeah.
like, was there some point where like the Proto-Uralic speakers are super dominant for Proto-Indo-Iranian speakers, like somewhere? Like, where is that? You know?
Yeah, that's a.
Um,
I feel like it's like I don't want to touch that with like a 10-foot pole. I feel like I'm just kind of out of my depth on
sure.
that situation. And there's tons of people who like to work on that stuff, who like to really get in the weeds, and I don't. I'm not in that kind of problem. I don't know. It's not.
No, because
But
you can't answer it. Like, all you can do is just be like, this is intriguing. You know?
But you also have to like, ideally, if you're working on that kind of question, like you're looking at the linguistic evidence, but you're really working very, very closely with the archaeological evidence as well. And so in principle, you should be trained in both of these things. And I am not trained in archaeology. And actually, I think one nice thing that David Anthony did when he came to our conference, uh, we gave a very, and he was there, it produced this paper that we were just talking about before, just pointed to, yeah, like we really need way more cooperation between people who are trained Indo-European linguists, or or trained historical linguists, and people who have a really strong grasp on the data. And ideally, we would each have at least some amount of training in the other, so that we can sort of interface more
100%.
more easily. I mean, right? Like the best partnerships are ones where it's like, yeah, each person is kind of an expert in their own domain, but also have some amount of shared knowledge
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm
But
gonna just, sorry.
I think the tough thing there, or one tough thing there, is it, if you're a linguist, you're sort of trained to think that linguistic evidence is more important. If you're an archaeologist, you're trained to think archaeological evidence is more important. You have to have that respect between the two parties. So these are both important. These both tell a story,
Yeah,
and
no, they should go hand in hand, and I think then that's I do think that there are we should be concerned about about the results of that Hegarty paper, just because it's so hard to reconcile with and then of course there's just the more general linguistic black box of these phylogenetic models, like what exactly is going into these, and why are they getting the results that they're getting.
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, but I mean, all of these fields, one way or another, are sort of in their infancy.
Mhm.
I mean, and then you bring in all the paleogenetic stuff that's very much in its infancy.
Yeah, that stuff is going to continue to change the terms of the debate, and that's kind of fun and cool.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch. I would love to talk to someone who really, really knew what they were talking about with that stuff.
With the paleogenetic stuff, I mean, really,
Yeah.
the person to talk, I think he's too, he might be, well, I don't know, you've got a fancy podcast, or whatever we call this thing, but David Reich is really the
Yeah.
person to talk to, and
Yeah.
he gives great, very clear talks, and,
Oh yeah.
but I'm sure,
one of the most informative writers about the subject. I have no idea how to reach out to people like that, though. This is like, hi, I have a YouTube channel.
I don't know, a mutual point of contact or something. David Anthony has worked variously in tandem with him, and I mean, I don't know, but of course, whenever he published something, there's like some list of authors that's like, we've got, because of the nature of this paper, that I don't know if other people have seen, if this might be amusing for people to click through if they see that Anthony paper that was posted in the chat. The paper is pretty short. It's only about 12 pages, but because it's citing all of this recent paleogenetics and linguistic phylogeny, like a bunch of like major papers in there. It's got like 40 pages of bibliography, because all of the like you have to list out these names that are like 100 names,
Right.
on one of these science or nature articles or whatever. It's completely absurd.
That's amazing. Like, even if you put it in 7-point font.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jay asked a question: how does new work on Indo-European get accepted? Is it just whether it's convincing enough to enough experts, or are there more objective measures?
I think the answer, I mean, in the first place, you need to convince at least some of the experts, which that seems okay to me. The more depressing thing is how it achieves widespread acceptance in the field, like even just among experts. And you like to think that these things, ideas gain traction based on their virtues, like them really being the best and strongest and most scientifically demonstrated points. I think the truth here is actually Planck's principle more than anything else. Basically, you convince maybe a few of your colleagues, and then you and your colleagues who believe this thing continue to train the next generation of students, and some of them work on it, but the other ones just carry it forward, and that's how it spreads mostly in the field. That's super depressing. It's super depressing, but this is just like, I mean, I don't think Indo-European is weak is unique like this, but
No.
so much of like, I guess the thing is our field is so, it requires you to be so, there's so much of it, right? I mean, any Indo-European language at any older stage. Sometimes there are people obviously in the field who dip deeper into the modern languages, and occasionally evidence comes from there too. So it's not even just chronologically bounded; it goes across the world, basically the whole, and so and then there's all these internal specializations, like there are people who with an archaeological focus, like we were talking about, but like also people with a linguistic focus, and some of them say, oh, I work on syntax or phonology or morphology, and or even something within one of those within one of those domains. And so I guess my feeling is like a lot of the way that the knowledge in this field gets passed down is like you'll give your students your very special take, your own unique take on the thing that you work on the most, but then all of the other stuff that gets passed on is just like whatever your teacher probably told you they thought was right, and that's going to be informed by what their teachers thought. So there's this sense of like, I don't know, things change pretty slowly, and people are reluctant to abandon ideas that say their teachers taught them, even as new evidence comes out. Some people are much better at this than others, at abandoning things once new, better hypotheses arise. Other people are much more reluctant to do so.
Yeah. As you talked about this, an analogy occurred to me, calling back to our statement that we're not archaeologists, although I sometimes uh, perhaps dress very similarly to one. And famously, in the Last Crusade movie, he stands at the brink of that cavern, right? And has to take the leap of faith,
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember it.
So, like, the thing is, you can either stay really close to the side of the cavern that you're on, or you can try to take that leap of faith. But most places that you could lean into the cavern, you're just going to tumble out.
Mm.
It takes a lot to find the exact spot that's going to walk you over to the other side of the cavern. And a lot of that might be just luck, like you say that you conclude that there is this is not something I actually believe, but just as a random example, something. Say that you've decided that you're going to look real hard at Proto-Germanic, something like that.
Mm.
And you're like, oh my gosh, there's some really stunning sound correspondences to Proto-Indo-European. But it's like, but that's such a big conclusion that I'm really afraid of being the guy to sort of like lean into the cavern and talk about this. Because if it turns out that there's some obvious reason why this doesn't work that somebody else points out, then I'm the idiot who said that these two branches are related,
Mm-hmm.
So there's always that kind of reluctance to make too huge of a jump. But at the same time, I think that the field is pretty responsible at rejecting way over what's a word? Maybe over hubristic claims. I don't know anybody who takes Nostratic seriously, for example, but
I mean, I think many people take it seriously as like, I mean that, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to say. It's like, something that it could have existed, but it's hard to say anything meaningful about what it would have been like, other than it would have been like other natural languages.
sure, it's the most responsibly researched mega family idea.
Mhm. Yeah.
And wasn't it Brian Joseph and Joseph Sammons edited a volume like there was like the best evidence for Nostratic?
I think so. Yeah, I think yes, I think so. And if it's I mean, I know that one of my teachers, Brett Vine, has an article on this, which I thought goes way back. I don't know if it's in that volume or not, but yeah, there is that volume as either as well or as a complement to this thing. Yeah, I mean, that would be a place to go and look at it for people who are interested. But yeah, one needs to be constrained about, one needs to be very careful about these mega family comparisons, just because there's just so little, I guess that there's just there's so little that's, that you should, I mean, even we should, even if we believe them, we shouldn't expect to find very much evidence for them, just because there would have been so much times for change in between when they were spoken and when we actually get attestation. Yeah.
And I want to see,
yeah,
I want to see not just correspondences, but systematically predictive correspondences,
yeah,
like for example, I think it's super intriguing that there's a shared irregularity in the root for water between reconstructed Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Uralic.
Yeah,
super intriguing. But can you say, I predict this same irregularity will show up in more roots shared between Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Uralic, and find that same heteroclitic structure? Like, I think it disappears after that one word. So it's like, this could be a really intriguing fossil.
Yeah, I mean, Anatolian is one of the famous darkisms, is that really is quite good at preserving heteroclite type inflection. So it has it like, you have whole sets of paradigms that are alternate between a stem final R and a stem final N. And
water, fire, sun,
water, fire. It does not have sun, but yeah, but there's a bunch more. The word for liver is another one of these famous heteroclites, which that one is actually cool because it's still a heteroclite even in yeah, let me make sure I've got this right. Yeah, it's still a heteroclite in Sanskrit, or basically a heteroclite. Yakar, yakna, yakin as the weak stem. And but Hittite has tons of these, including in productive derivational morphology. It has a whole class of words that are in adar, and on, ann, which is from the assimilation of tn. So it's like these are a pretty, this is, it's kind of famously one of those things where Anatolian just looks old. Yeah,
and
yeah, that's a cool thing though. It's about the water, where I'd sort of forgotten about the share, the possibility of some kind of a transfer one direction or the other.
Yeah, and I've had people get frustrated with me for saying, like, I think it's really interesting, right? I mean, like, that could really point to an old relationship. I just can't accept it as a given. Right? It's like, I'm not willing to jump off that bridge and say, like, yeah, there's a Proto-Indo-European, Proto-Uralic shared ancestral languages. Like, sure, maybe there is, but like, I'm not going to commit to it.
There was one that a few years ago, I don't know if people have seen this, I'll drop it here, but this attempt to make a comparison between Basque or Pro-Basque and Proto-Indo-European. And it was done, this is the kind of thing that would normally get, I think, laughed out of the room, except that it was done by Juliet Blevins, who's a very like serious linguist. And I don't think anyone has really, like, this is one where I think it offers some insight into the person's question. It's like, my feeling is that she didn't make that strong of an attempt to really, convince one or two specialists and let it kind of spread that way. Like, this book never even got like a proper review. And I saw an early version of this, like a short talk on this material, and I found it intriguing. I just haven't had a chance to sit down with this book and really go through it systematically. But the little bit that I saw in the talk was like, it looks kind of okay. It's not something I would have been inclined to believe, but in any case, I feel like it kind of hasn't had a serious hearing in the field, which is a shame. I mean, even if the result is, someone looked at it very carefully and came to the conclusion that this really doesn't work at all, it just hasn't had that kind of, I feel like it hasn't been maybe, given its due the attention that it maybe deserves.
Well, you know what? This book is only 2 digits. Maybe this is something we should both look over and consider.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting idea. I've been kind of looking for a prompt to actually read this book. I mean,
Well,
to really read. So maybe that's something for next. It would take this like that would be a homework project. So it would
Yeah.
probably but maybe next year. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an excuse to read it maybe before January or something. Like,
Okay.
just it'd be kind of fun to talk about here. Maybe we could even like, do you know what you say is Juliet Blevins? Do you know her?
Not well, but I mean, writer. No. It's I'm ostensibly a serious Indo-Europeanist, so I could say something like, "Oh, we're
I
just a
think
couple of Indo-Europeanists who are serious leaders in this book."
I think as a professor at UCLA, yeah, you are ostensibly a serious Indo-Europeanist. I mean, I'm just some weird YouTube guy in a cowboy hat. So
Yeah, but you guys have gotten your audience, your very perceptive audience is they know the real deal. They know that I'm just winging it outside of my specialty. If
well, and I still remember you as a callow student, right? So,
that's right.
fresh,
Yeah.
fresh faced from the academy and looking for my guidance in life in Old Norse.
I saw that you had you made a Halloween video. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I saw that you just posted one the other day.
Well, I did. But I don't know. I was looking for things that were sort of spooky, and I'd already done the zombie subject. I didn't feel like revisiting it yet, so I did words for wolf because there's ulver and then varger, the more negative word that was on Wednesday.
Wait, what is
And
the
then,
first? Oh, the wolf one. Yeah.
yeah, and then today I talked about Fimbulvetter, the horrible winter that accompanies Ragnarok, and I just wore my Halloween costume because I was just like, my Indiana Jones costume is composed entirely of things I wear anyway. It's
Yep.
just like
I
I have to just put together all the ingredients at one time, and it's like suddenly Indiana Jones costume. So,
I have two follow-ups there. One of them is great. So you said the two words for wolf are the normal wolf one,
yeah.
and then what was the other? Sorry, what were the two again? Just say them again.
So there's the typical Indo-European word, the Wolkos word.
Yeah.
And then
Wolf,
there's
whatever.
and there's Vargar, which actually it's not clear what the Indo-European derivation could be. I think the best explanation is that it's something to do with the Germanic root rekon, like English wreck, W-R-E-C-K, like drive out.
Oh,
It's like outlaw, but comes to be wolf. So
kind of neat. We have wolf in Anatolian too. We have that word. It's kind of problematic, but we do.
is it Wolkawa, something like that?
We have in Luvian, we have Walwa, which is not, I mean, it's obviously the wolf word, and that's how it should come out, basically. And well, I mean, but it's kind of problematic in both Hittite and Luvian, but it comes out as Walwa, and it's definitely the right. It's got to be. I mean, it really can't be anything else, and it means lion, because obviously they don't have wolves in Turkey or whatever.
That's cool. That's like the beaver root becoming mongoose in Sanskrit. Yeah,
exactly. And then in Hittite we have just this word walkwan, which is I think the one you're talking about, where so the guy and you really get it famously in this expression where the woman says, she says, "He quit walkwan haskun." You see it, you get in this, it basically means something like monstrosity, like she. So it's like this. It's this story where she gives birth to 30 sons all at once. This is the story of Zalpa. So all in one, she gives birth to 30 sons at the same time. And interestingly, this is also the kind of Hittite version of the Moses story, basically. So like when she gives birth to these things, which she then calls a walkwan, a monstrosity or something like that, she then puts them in baskets and floats them down the river, and they get picked up and raised by the gods and so on at this other city. And anyway, it's kind of like it's clearly got that the Moses trope or whatever you want to call it.
Two questions come out of this for me. One is Anatoly Lieberman thought that Walkawa word was an adjective, right? Well, quos, right? Emphasis second syllable, meaning like horrid, and that the wolf or monster word wolquos is just a substantiation of that adjective. Do you think
that's kind of an old idea, or at least I mean, as far as I mean, it may be his original idea, but
it can still be old if it's
It can still be kind of old. I would have thought it'd go back even further than that. Yeah, that's possible. Maybe I don't know. I mean, to my mind, the thing that we can reconstruct for Proto-Indo-European is more clearly than anything else is just the wolf word with a weird stressed zero grade. If you want to get it via in this way, via some kind of a, yeah. I'm not in love with substantivizing accent retraction, as they sometimes call it, but yeah, maybe. It's an idea. There's a more recent paper on this, actually, for anybody who's interested, by Patrick Stiles. He just had a new article trying to do. I don't remember where he ultimately comes down. I wrote with him a little bit about it. But yeah, if you're interested in the what the etymology, the deep, what in a non-ironic way, Georges Pinot called the true etymology, which is very funny. He has it for the true etymology of the Sun word, which I thought is a very hilarious name for an article. Sorry, for those who are know here, right? Etymology should be the true part is built in. Yeah, anyway, so the true etymology of the wolf word, you can look at Patrick Stiles' article. Yeah.
I'd be really interested to see what Stiles says about it.
Yeah.
The second question that came to mind when you're talking about this sort of Hittite Moses story reflex, where could someone not familiar with any Anatolian languages read something about Hittite myth or literature more broadly?
Hittite myth, Hittite literature more broadly. The problem is that a lot of, I mean, if you have someone who speaks German, then there's a lot of stuff to be read. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's like really like, yeah, like really like big giant book length studies of Hittite literature. If you want like a kind of general picture, there's a couple of neat handbook articles. I think several of them all, like, Gary Beckman has one on something like Hittite literature, literally from one of these handbook volumes. I think it's downloadable. If you do some Googling, if you search like Hittite literature Beckman, I can't remember exactly where it came out. And also he has one on Hittite myth and a few other things. For Hittite myth in particularly, if that's something that people are interested, Harry Hoffner has a big book where one of those Society of Biblical Literature volumes just called Hittite Myths. I think it's this. It has a second edition, and it has a lot of just general discussion of Hittite mythology and then translations of all of the things that are Hittite myths. So
that sounds perfect.
That would be that, and that's in English. That's in English. So that's a very accessible way to kind of get at the Hittite material. And but yeah, like the really like broad sweeping there are these like 1,000-page books that you can read on Hittite religion or Hittite literature, but all that stuff is in German, Volker Haas and so on.
Would you recommend anything in particular? I mean, a pretty good amount of my audience reads German.
Let me yeah, so you have so I wrote I would take rather than, so you have, so I mean there's literally a book called Die Hethitische Literatur by this guy Volker Haas. He also wrote another thing on this is the name. He also has a big thing on Hittite religion as well. That would be one possible place to go. Norbert Edinger who's another big fan, kind of big time Anatolianist, and also he's also done a huge amount of work on Indo-Iranian. He is right now almost finished with a new book on Hittite myth and religion, and that should become that's one like to kind of put on your radar, and will come out I think sometime in the next year or two. As I've had some correspondence with him to suggest that, and that will be really cool because that will give you situate these things in their wider European context. And Norbert really knows Indo-Iranian and really knows Anatolian, really, among almost, among the best in the world. So that's something cool to look forward to.
Excellent. Is that going to be in German?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a nice guy. He's willing to write a little bit with me in English, or he writes to me in German, and then I write back to him in English. So he's willing to tolerate my English, but and his English is of course quite good if you actually talk to him. But yeah, actually this is just a field where German is still going strong. Yeah. I mean, the field of Anatolian studies generally.
Yeah. Well, I have to read German all the time too, but mostly older stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that's. I mean, it kind of makes sense that stuff on Old Norse, especially, is like it would have been written in German at some point. But like, why would why would they continue to write in German? It's not like they're we're not dealing. It's not a mother tongue situation.
Yeah, in fact, it endlessly frustrates me sometimes to read like some of these early 20th century Scandinavian scholars, like sort of not so great German. It's like, God, I wish you had just written in your native language.
Mhm.
But actually, to this day, runology, uh, so much of that is done in the Scandinavian languages still. Yeah, so it's interesting how some fields just never quite quite became quite so English dominant as some of the other things.
Mhm.
Which
Hey,
is
you
fine.
said. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
I was going to switch. I remembered I had some second question, and the second question was, you said you did Indiana Jones again for Halloween. Did people ask you whether you saw the most recent Indiana Jones movie?
no, that didn't come up. Um, I have not seen it. I did see Crystal Skull just because it's on Rift Tracks.
Yeah,
If they do the fifth one on Rift Tracks, I'll probably watch it.
that would be a better way. I watched a few minutes of it when I was on the plane, just most like last week to going. I went and gave a talk at the University of Richmond, where my friend Dieter Gunkel teaches,
Nice.
and I talked about Anatolian poetry in the second one ABC, which was kind of fun just to talk about what the evidence looks like. At any rate, while I was on the plane, I watched a few minutes of this Indiana Jones movie, and I watched like a little bit of the beginning. I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. And then I fast forward. I knew that at the end there's a scene where they have them talking. I guess, what's supposed to be ancient Greek. With you have Indiana Jones and like his lady sidekick talking to.
Is it Marion? Does Marion come back and
Yeah,
live?
yeah.
Okay, well that's cool at least. I mean, like,
No, no, no. She does, but there's also like this is a young. Lots of it is him and this young woman. That's like
oh,
I don't know what's going on in the movie. I know. I just know that it's like you got Harrison Ford, you got this woman, and then it's supposed to be which one of I forgot. It's one of these famous ancient Greek sort of philosopher guys, and he's
okay.
invented this magic disc, or it's whatever the name of the movie. I forgot. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, it was kind of cute, even if it didn't make any sense. And why would anybody even know ancient Greek or whatever they were doing? I mean, little bits of it sounded like ancient Greek to me, so could be worse.
That's fun. Could you give us the cliff notes of your Anatolian poetry talk? What?
Yeah. So the question is whether there is poetry in Anatolia in the second millennium BCE. So there is definitely, obviously, in the first millennium. There's metrical inscriptions in Lydian and so on. Um, but yeah, what's going on in the second millennium? And I mean, it's long been suspected that there is, and indeed there are some Hittite texts that have been claimed to be poetry. So like the song, the best evidence for this is the fact that instead of having when they're introduced with like verbs that mean sing, or they're labeled songs. So like the most famous of these is the Song of Ulukumi, where it gets introduced with the singer saying, with the performer saying, I'm singing about Kumarbi, the father of the gods. And then on the colophon, the little, the scribe's notes on the side of the thing, it labels it like the Song of Ulukumi. So people have thought that there's been Hittite poetry, and then Cal Watkins has this he famously observed that there may be that we have we we have this text that is it's a festival text in Hittite, and so there's this festival associated with this Hittite city, the city of Astanuwa, and so basically these festival texts describe like all of the things that are supposed to happen during the festival. So it often involves like, ritual, some kind of a priest going around and manipulating objects and like tying little bits of yarns on animals and pouring libations and so on. And then you get like little bits where some kind of a song gets performed in this festival. And all of these songs are in Luvian.
Hmm.
And we don't get the whole song. We only get the first line or maybe the first two lines. And one of these, what look like the first lines of a song is, let me see, Harata alati awienta wilusati. They when they came from far off Wilusa, and the idea, his idea is a Wilusa that matches very neatly with Greek Ilion. It's one of these. It seems to be the indigenous name for well, at least one of the Anatolian place names for the city of Troy or the place around it. And Cal suggested that this was the first line of an epic poem, a Luvian epic poem about, you know, the city of Troy or maybe the Trojan War or something. All we have is that one line, but it kind of looks like poetry. It's alliterative, among other things. Ahara ta alati awienta wilusati. So you get some alliteration running through it. And then, yeah, nice, the true Wiliad. Anyway, so basically the question is, so in the first place, are there features that that we find that are common to that bit of Luvian poetry and the stuff that's been argued to be Hittite poetry? And my answer is basically yes. It looks, even if so. Question one, are there poetic features other than meter? And then question two, is there meter? And I think the answer to question one is pretty clearly yes. Things like alliteration and stylistic repetition. You have in Hittite epic, you have what look like noun epithet formulas, which kind of look like stuff that we see in Greek. That's kind of cool. So you have things like, you know, Ulukumi the Smasher, when he did, you know, like that's, you know, he's the Konkonotsi, and the storm god is the you know, the heroic, you know, the hero, the mighty hero of what, I forgot what the city name is, but anyway, you get these what feel like Homeric Greek style noun epithet formulae, stuff like that. And then so that's the question one part, and then the question two is there a meter? And that's much harder to say. It's not syllable counting. It would be like maybe stress counting, if anything. And but that's a harder problem. And if people are really interested, they can just find the slides on my website. They're posted. I like to think there is one. I think there's a meter, but you know, maybe that's optimistic.
I'd be interested to find out what more comes of that. It does not seem like there is such a thing as an inherited Indo-European meter, right? I mean, you look at,
well, I mean, it's pretty clear that that however you do it, the Greek and Vedic metrical traditions are cognate in some way or another. And then that kind of gets you to something that you might say is like near, you know, at least get you to some kind of a lower node of the Indo-European language family that includes, you know, most of them, maybe not Anatolian and Tocharian, but yeah, no, right. So if there really was a Proto-European meter, then how, you know, we might expect to find evidence for it in Germanic, Tocharian, Anatolian, and we don't really find it in any of those places. So that's kind of harder to.
Well, I was just thinking that like traditional Germanic, Celtic, Italic meters are pretty different from that shared Vedic, Greek tradition. So there's something, or it's just being replaced in those other branches, right? I mean, that's another possibility.
Could be. If there is anything that, I mean, the Anatolian stuff, if it looks like anything, it looks more like the situation in Germanic and
stress counting, like you said.
Yeah, some kind of stress counting meter with, maybe alliteration as kind of one of the grounding principles, but not every line is alliterative, and so it's not as, I don't know, that can't be exactly the principle. It's just some of them are. So yeah, it's really a hard question, and it's not helped by the fact that we don't have long running texts of poetry. Like the Song of Ulukumi is in pretty good shape, but all of the other things that are song are pretty fragmentary and short, and even within Ulukumi, you don't really get like 50 preserved lines in a row or something. You know, everything is a little bit of a mess, and so that makes it hard to say whether, you know, whether verse lines are all of the same schema when, like, you know, every fifth line has some missing pieces in it.
Which might suggest that it's being passed down from a time much earlier, right? Like it's, you know, whoever's transmitting it doesn't fully understand what the words are supposed to be or something like that.
Oh no, I mean, like, it's the tech. I mean, like, the physical manuscript is like
oh, it's physically missing.
No, it's physically, no, sorry, I just meant it was, yeah, I have, if you look at these slides that I have up there on the website, then I have some pictures of the tablets, and like you can physically, I mean, you know, they're just big kind of gaping holes in them, and in a way that's not like atypical for Hittite, but it's just,
Sure.
you know, it's just kind of sad I mean, that's the best example of this, of this sort of genre, whatever exactly it is. And it's not even in great shape. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be cool to see more. I mean, get
Sounds-
some Hittite epics, you know, some Luvian epics.
This Kalasma thing is like a reason for hope, right? Like, new things can show up, and maybe we'll learn something cool and exciting. And that was the optimistic note that I ended the talk on. Like, I hope that these are questions that, you know, will be, you know, I hope we'll find more stuff, and then maybe we can answer some of the stuff. I mean, look, in Anatolia, it's so easy. Like, there's just, the Anatolian plateau is littered with these big, you know, with these big mounds that are clearly have old cities or something under them, and like, we just have to, you know, we just have to dig them all up, and eventually we'll turn things up.
I hope so.
I heard. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've heard from the from archaeologists that I know, that they're finally now getting down to the older layers you know, at the, you know, at the old capital of Phrygia, you know, at the city of Midas and so on. I'm sorry, I don't know why my brain is failing to draw out the name here. But at Gordian, sorry, there we go. Thank you. And so maybe we'll get some excited. I mean, probably not second millennium stuff, but you know, we'll get some, maybe get some new Lydian or something. That seems like a realistic possibility in the near term.
That'd be awesome. And I mean, you know, you can't be greedy about this. It's like, I take some first millennium, you know, some more first millennium Anatolian. Why not?
The greedy thing would be to say, look, archaeologists, I know that we have to be really careful and move slowly, and, you know, catalog all the potsherds, and study the you know, the dirt to see its constituency and so on. And all of these are like important to the whole enterprise, but also, guys, just like, get me those tablets, get me them texts. You know, it's very that would be the greedy, selfish thing to say.
Well, grab your whip, which I'm sure that you know, always have handy, and head out to Turkey one summer.
I don't dress as Indiana Jones, so I don't have to have a pick. But yeah, it would be a good idea. I saw someone asked if you have a whip. Do you have an Indian?
I once had an actual, like, full-fledged bullwhip, and I don't know where it is now. So this Halloween, well, you know, I think when I refer to vacation in September, I used, you know, asterisk on it, because it's sort of a word I feel very tentative about using still, right? So like this for this Halloween, I feel like I should put, you know, asterisk girlfriend, just because it seems like such a difficult word to believe. Bought me just one of those crappy foam whips from Spirit, so I at least had one, but I felt extremely self-conscious going into a Spirit Halloween store.
Can't go too often. I mean, you know, you were testing it on for size. You felt like the whip was you know, that's a starter whip, and you might proceed to a more serious whip. Someone recommends elk. Is that what someone said? Where did that go? I saw
it disappeared. Yeah.
Where did it go?
She deleted it.
Whatever.
But what was I going to say? Did you ever see Kaylee's Jackson Crawford costume?
No. Is there pictures on Facebook or something?
Probably are. It's pretty good. Like, he doesn't look that much like me. It's not from this year, it's like from years ago. But like,
Let's get Kaylee and Luke and do a round table. That would be fun, or whatever, whatever we call this thing.
I would I would love to. I am sure trying to get that many people's schedules together would be nearly impossible. But
All right,
um,
think about it. I haven't talked to Kaylee in years. I would have liked, I would like to. I heard he finally has a job and he has a kid, and so
second one coming.
second one coming.
Yeah.
Gotta say that second one stuff, it's beautiful and great, but man, they've got you evenly matched at that point, or in terms of numbers, and I don't know, that's I wish the best of luck to all the parents and future parents out there.
So you're saying that, like, you hit number one, it's a big watershed, and then number two is another big watershed, like it.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, that seems really trivial when you put it that way, but yeah, I take your
Oh,
point.
I'm not trying to trivialize it. I respect it a lot.
Mhm.
Having no experience of such things.
Yeah.
Closest thing I have to a kid is a 52-year-old who acts like one that I often feel somewhat responsible for the misdeeds of.
Yep, get that. Yep.
Family
Hey,
man.
let me ask you a quick question. Did you see, I put this group, this thing about Germanic subgrouping in the chat. It was on my mind because it's a new book about Germanic phylogeny.
Yeah,
And I met the guy who gave whose book this is at the UC Indo-European conference, which the most recent one just took place this past weekend. And I just wonder if you'd seen it.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to take a look at it though. Of course, it's 3 digits, but worth taking a look at. I've got to see this. I mean, I know he's done some interesting work on like Vandalic, like.
Yes, those are his Germanic kind of the Germanic side of his research was kind of on these minor Germanic languages, the like whose position within the Germanic family is kind of disputed, tricky, something like that.
Yeah, I'm interested to take a look at it. Maybe that's something we can go over next month. Anything really good you can report on for us from WCAG?
Was there really good stuff? Yeah, there were some neat papers, but nothing like earth-shaking. We had Andreas Villi here as one of the key speakers who's talking about these ionic, they're so-called ionic preterites. They're these forms in eskon. They're like thematic verbs extended by the skesko suffix, and they seem to be a feature of Ionic Greek. And his question was, why did these develop? Because they're quite odd from an Indo-European perspective. Normally, ske is something that attaches to roots. Only really in Anatolian do they not. And so there's always been this question of whether it's a contact feature or something like that. He tries to come up with a story for why they might have made these things, whether it's borrowing or just innovation. Why the Greeks would have been interested in creating these esco forms. I thought it was kind of neat. I didn't ultimately agree with all the pieces, but mostly because I don't tend to believe his analysis of the augment. But I thought it was a really nice talk, and then we had a bunch of other kind of smaller stuff. But I was really one of our former students, Ian Hollenbaugh, gave a very neat paper on how you do commands basically in Indo-European, like what the Vedic and Greek and other languages kind of split on what kinds of formations you use to do commands in positive and negative contexts. Sometimes sometimes you'll use some kind of a negative plus a modal form, like a subjunctive. Sometimes you'll use the things that are traditionally called injunctives in Vedic. There's also, of course, imperatives, and yeah, basically each language shows some kind of funny different behavior when negation gets involved versus the positive one. So like even Hittite, which doesn't have nearly as much verb morphologies as those other languages I was mentioning, when you do a positive command, do X, then you use an imperative, but when you use a negative command, then so Hittite the negator is lay. If you use that, then you switch to actually indicative forms. So you don't use an imperative anymore. You just use lay plus, plus indicative. So almost every language has some kind of a split, but they don't match, is the interesting question. So what is it about the system that lets it, I don't know, what is the nature of a system that can generate all of the attested systems when there aren't matches between them, except that they agree in not doing it in the same way in positive, negative contexts? That was a cool
Interesting.
paper.
Interesting. Well, was there a conclusion? Or
the solution is not an easy one, so I would just say go through the handout. It's on all of the handouts are posted on the UCLA Pies conference webpage. So I would say if you think that sounds, if you think that's cool, you should go see his solution. It has to do with, he has a solution that involves markedness and trying to use basically unmarked forms and imperatives, and what that means is going to end up being different in different languages. I find it very attractive. I think Ian is doing some of the coolest work on the Indo-European verbal system kind of that's out there now.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
because that is a cool question. I mean, just as you said it, I was kind of like turning the pages in my mind of different ways Indo-European languages do those negative imperatives. And you're right, there's a lot of different solutions to this, including in modern languages. Right. Like I think different dialects of Spanish do different things here. And then like
anything in Germanic, anything interesting?
Yeah, you can get the negative and then the infinitive.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think you also see in some Romance languages. So
you see it in Greek too and other places. Yeah. It's like a third strategy even to the modals and imperatives and so on.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I will check that out because I'd be intrigued to see what he's done with that. Well, I think it's a pretty good roundup.
Yeah. Can I flag something?
Yeah. It's
application season for people who might want to do Indo-European. And that's not just here at UCLA. Our deadline is in January, but I am planning to do a kind of informational session, I think, on this in the next couple of weeks for people who, whether it's this year or some future year, are thinking about maybe doing graduate studies in Indo-European, and that could be at UCLA or elsewhere. And so if that sounds cool to you, I would say keep an eye on my Twitter. I'll tweet out information about this. I'll also post it on my website. But I suspect Twitter is going to be an easier place to find it because you're probably not just hitting refresh on my website every day. So,
are you at AD Yates?
Yeah, that's right. Like this. And yeah, so if that sounds like something you're interested in or something that your friends are interested in, I'm going to try to just give a general overview on like what kind of options are available for grad schools and take any questions about, I don't know, what, where you might go if you're interested in this problem or that, or whatever it is that occurs to the aspiring Indo-Europeanist youth.
Indo-Europeanist youth. I mean, they're out there. So.
You and I were once one. I don't know. These things.
It's true. In my callow early days, fresh faced from the academy.
We were all young once. And now we're here.
Well, sir, it's been great to chat with you as always. Thanks for actually, I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground here.
I think so.
Good update. Well, I'll get this up publicly shortly. And everybody on Patreon, thanks for coming. Thanks for your support. And yeah, see you next time. Hopefully
thanks for having me again. Look forward to chatting soon. Yeah, take it easy.
Yeah, let's keep doing this semi-regularly.
Okay.
All the best.
Bye, all.